This video is to show you how to prepare a canvas panel where you're going to glue that piece of canvas onto a piece of board for a very stiff support. Here you'll see first I'm cutting the corners off. I've left about 2.5 inches of a border that we'll be able to wrap around to the back. You need to leave about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch as you cut those corners off, a space. You're going to glue that canvas onto a piece of masonite. It needs to be a 1/4 inch masonite or hardboard. You won't use plywood because plywood can bow once you glue that on there. Here I'm just slightly abrading, very lightly sanding the board all over the front surface where the canvas will be and across the edges and across the borders onto the back. This will just create a little bit better adhesion for sticking the canvas on there. So you don't have to do a whole lot of this. It's not really intensive, just really quickly abrading that surface all the way around. It's very dusty and messy when you do this. You won't necessarily see it on these tables as I'm doing this until I wipe it up. You need to clean that all off before you actually do the gluing down, because that will get caught in your glue and kind of mess up what you're gluing down. Here I am mixing up a batch of rabbit skin glue. I've used a very hot water. It doesn't have to quite be boiling, but something close to that. So thoroughly mixing it the same way that you would with Jello or gelatin, because really it's the same thing. You could actually use unflavored gelatin. I just sprinkled some of the rabbit skin glue in there. It essentially is the same thing. It looks the same way. So you need a slightly cloudy mixture. You don't want it to start to set. It needs to be really watery as you put it on there. Here I'm covering the entire surface, front surface of the board with the very watery glue. You just want it to soak in to begin with. So when you place the canvas on top of it before you start putting the glue through the canvas onto the board, it's actually going to adhere a little bit better because it's already starting to stick through there. So just make sure you can kind of see when it gets kind of saturated and soaked with it. It'll get darker. Some of those areas are lighter right now. Make sure you go around the edges there. You can see that I'm doing that because you're going to have to get that area plenty wet and be able to pull the canvas around the edge of the board and make sure that it sticks to it. I put the canvas down underneath it first because it's going to keep the table clean, but the table is going to get pretty messy at this point once you start doing the regular gluing here. Make sure that you've got that centered, that canvas centered on the board, and that you still have that 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the corners. The canvas is made out of cotton. We have a couple different types that we use in my classes, and depending on what the weave is, when that cotton gets wet, kind of like your clothing, it can shrink down, and with this hot water on there, it can really pull it in, and you could have open areas on the corners if you didn't leave enough room there. Once this is completely dry and before you put the gesso on it, you will actually be able to clip off that excess that's on the corners. Everything else will have flattened down on the board. There you can see I just took a little piece of thread that was from the canvas from underneath. You got to make sure that if there's anything that gets trapped underneath there that you get it taken out, or it will just get glued under there and it'll show up in your final painting. So I'm using my hands kind of like a squeegee after I get the canvas itself saturated with the glue. It needs to be very wet. You'll be able to tell, you can see that it's already a little bit darker. You'll be able to see areas that still need more of the glue because they'll be a little bit lighter in color. Make sure it goes all the way around those edges like that, because it's going to be easier to wrap it around if that's already soaked in plenty of the glue. So just push it down with your hands. Once you get enough of the very watery glue in there, make sure that it is pushed out from the center out to the sides. You keep pushing and pushing. That way you'll be able to make sure that there aren't any air bubbles in it. You need to have it as flat as it can possibly be. That's the best way for it to adhere. Now I'm pulling the edges over. You kind of push that down. I usually use my thumbnail partly to really press it down on there. It looks like I'm just pressing it down, but part of what I'm also doing, you might be able to see here, is pulling around from the front to make sure that everything is totally flattened on there. So as you pull it up around the edge, so that you don't have, again, any bubbles that are around the edges, it'll keep everything flat on the back as well. Here I'm both getting the board wet underneath and then gluing down each of the flaps of that border all the way around. Basically the same thing that I did on the front. It doesn't look like it takes that long to do this, even though this is a 10-minute video, but you need to realize that when you're doing a 2x2 foot board, this really should take you from 20 to 30 minutes to get it done really well. You can't do this really quickly. It's a time-consuming process to make sure that it is done correctly. If you do it too quickly, I've seen different times when the canvas would come back up off of the board. It's pretty much not going to work as a painting if that has come back up off of there. So you want to make sure that it adheres as well as it possibly can. So again, pulling up around from the front, pushing down on the edges, making sure that it's plenty wet as you do that. You glue those flaps over and you can already see right here that there's that little excess that's kind of sticking off there. Now, everything is going to stiffen up once this is dry, and I suggest that you let this dry overnight. Just leave it somewhere and let it be completely dry. It shouldn't be damp at all when you begin to put the gesso coating on it. So again, soaking all of this canvas with that rabbit skin glue. You also have to work quickly because that rabbit skin glue will eventually gelatinize. It will actually turn to just like clear jello. So it needs to be pretty warm. As it starts getting cool, you'll see that it starts stiffening up a little bit. But here you just want to get that all pressed down. Let those little bits, those little kind of dog ears stick out of there. They're very easy to clip off with a pair of scissors once you're done. You will probably have a little bit of them come up when you clip them off. That's okay. The gesso will actually glue it back down. Thoroughly clean off your table. It's going to look like it's clean because it's clear, but it needs to be washed off several times. Then you can place your gesso on there. You really need to do 2 coats. It's probably going to take an hour to 90 minutes for each of the coats to dry on this. Really make sure that you get it into the weave of the canvas. You'll want to go around the edges and make sure those edges get covered up. You don't need to go onto the back, but you do want the edges to be filled in because you may paint over the edges as you're painting. So just make sure that that's all covered with gesso, and again, let it dry, and then you'll be able to come back onto it after an hour and a half and do the second coat. The second coat's already been done on this one. I'm adding a couple different colors of acrylic that I am going to really water down as I mix them up on here. This is not really part of the painting per se, but it's so that you don't have to start with just white as a color. Sometimes the white of the canvas becomes very intimidating to the artist, and so it's hard to begin a painting when it just is this white that is staring down at you. So what I'm applying here is just this thinned out coat that we refer to in an Italian term as an imprimatura. So just kind of do this wash across the whole thing. I don't care if it's completely even on there. It does need to be, in all the parts, but this will just make it easier as you begin to do your painting.